Hi everyone, Yasas que kalosirtate to another episode of Dimitra's Dishes. Today we're going to be making cheesy stuffed flatbreads. These are addictive. The bread is so soft, the recipe is so easy to make, and the filling is cheesy and creamy and so delicious. They literally go good with everything. Let's get started. So we're going to begin by making the dough, and it might look familiar to you because this is a recipe that I've used over and over again because it works. The method is simple, the ingredients are also very simple, and the result is always so pillowy soft, and it's just so good. Very easy to work with too. Let's get started making it. Okay, so to make the dough, we're gonna start off with the dry ingredients. I have 4 cups of all-purpose flour in a mixing bowl. You can use bread flour too, but I have all-purpose, so that's what I'm using. 1.5 teaspoons of salt, and just whisk it all together. In the mixing bowl that's fitted with a dough hook attachment, I'm gonna add 2 cups of lukewarm water, 2 teaspoons of sugar, 1.5 teaspoons of instant dry yeast, and 1/4 cup of flour. Whisk that all up and let it sit for about 8 minutes to make sure that the yeast is fresh and it activates. You'll know it's activated when a cloud forms on top of the mixture. So next, add 1/4 cup of olive oil to the mixture and all of the flour. And mix this on low speed for 10 minutes. So once you're done making the dough, transfer it to a bowl that's been greased with some olive oil. Toss the dough a couple of times around so that way it's coated in the olive oil. Cover the bowl with some plastic wrap and put it in the warmest place of your house or the warmest part of your house until the dough has doubled in volume. Now, I like to use the dryer method. I put a couple of towels, clean towels, in the dryer, let it run for 7 to 8 minutes, turn it off. Put the bowl in there, and in about an hour, the dough is ready. I love that trick. Otherwise, just set it aside and let it rise low and slow. That's fine too. Next, go ahead and make the cheese filling. So in a bowl, go ahead and shred 8 ounces of mozzarella cheese. It's much easier to shred when it's cold. Then go ahead and add 8 ounces of feta to it. You can just crumble it over the top. Then go ahead and add 8 ounces of soft cream cheese. You want to leave the cheese out for a few minutes or pop it in the microwave until it's nice and warm. Then add some freshly cracked black pepper, as much as you like, a teaspoon of dried oregano, and I also like to add some mint. If I don't have fresh mint, I usually have dried mint in the pantry. I just added a teaspoon of that as well. If you're using fresh mint, you could add half a teaspoon or as much as you like. You can taste the mixture and see if it needs a little bit more or more of something. I'm not adding any salt to this because all of the cheeses are nice and salty. Give it a nice mix and set it aside. So go ahead and transfer the dough to your work surface. And you can make these medium size or smaller. If you're making them on the smaller side, you're gonna get 16 flatbreads out of this. Otherwise, you'll get 8. I'll do a little bit of both so that way you can see the difference. First, cut the dough in half. And then in 4 pieces. And then cut each portion in half so you end up with 8. This is how you're gonna do the small ones. And when dough is at room temperature, it's very easy to work with. If you like to do the cold rise method, which is using the refrigerator, you would make the dough and let it rise overnight in the refrigerator. That's fine, but I'm not a fan because what happens is it takes a very long time for the dough to come to room temperature. And if you've ever worked with cold dough that has yeast in it, every time you try to stretch it out, even if you're rolling it out or doing it by hand, it contracts and it shrinks and you can never get it to the right size. When the dough is at room temperature, you don't need a rolling pin. You literally press it with your fingers and it spreads out so evenly without any fuss. So that's why I try not to use the cold rise method unless I really have to. So you also want to have 2 baking trays that are lined with parchment paper ready to go. I keep my semolina flour in the freezer in a freezer safe bag. That way it stays fresh. Now to get that bakery feeling, what I do is I just sprinkle a little bit of semolina over the parchment paper on the baking tray. It's just gonna stick to the bottom and just make it taste like it came out of a bakery. If you don't have the flour, you don't have to get it. Just do this step, just leave it. Okay, these are so easy to make. You're just gonna take each little portion of dough and you're gonna spread it out as much as you can to get it nice and thin. You see how it doesn't contract at all when the dough is at room temperature? Now, if you've greased your bowl enough, these will not stick to the counter. But if they are sticking, do not use flour at this point. You could just rub a little bit of oil onto your work surface, and that's going to keep the dough from sticking. Adding flour would make it a little tough. And I'll do the same thing with the bigger ones. The reason I'm doing this step and where I'm spreading them all out first together is so that way I use up all of the filling. Otherwise, what happens is I get nervous and I put less in the first few that I'm making, and then I overstuff the last ones. So this way they all get a good amount of filling and I don't have any filling left over. You could also pre-portion the filling so that way you can do these one at a time. That's another idea. Okay, then in the small ones, you're gonna put a tablespoon, a heaping tablespoon full of filling, or you can just distribute this equally throughout all of them. Just put it in the center. So next, just overlap the edges of the dough that are not filled over the filling, just to cover it. Press it out and press it into a circle. You can press on the other side as well. Get it flat. It's going to rise a little bit more in the oven. And once you're done shaping them, just go ahead and put them on the baking tray that's prepared with the parchment paper. Okay, so once you assemble these stuffed pitas, go ahead and of course put them, like we said, on the baking trays that are lined with parchment paper and sprinkled with some semolina on them. I like to melt a little bit of salted butter and just brush each pita on top. If you want to, you can sprinkle some sesame seeds. I have some black sesame seeds. I'll just do some of them and leave the rest plain. My oven is preheated to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. I like to bake one tray at a time, and before I go on to baking them, while the oven is preheating, let them rest. If you let them rest for about 30 minutes until they puff up just a little bit, they're going to be more fluffy. So otherwise you can bake them straight away and they will still be delicious. Bake each tray on the center rack for 15 minutes. Then I like to move it to the top rack where the heat is a little more intense and it allows them to get beautiful color, and I let it bake on the top rack for between 6 to 8 minutes. Keep an eye on them because ovens do vary and I don't want you to burn these. So as soon as they develop that beautiful color, you can take them out and let them sit at room temperature so for a few minutes, 10 minutes or so, and then they're ready to serve. You can serve these with anything. If you're making a double batch, or maybe this batch is too much for you, these freeze beautifully. You can transfer them once they've cooled down. Of course, you have to bake them first. You can't freeze yeasted dough. At least I haven't had good experience with it. But once they've cooled down, you can transfer them to freezer-safe bags and just freeze them up to 1 or 2 months. I mean, who are we kidding? They're not going to last that long. These taste good with everything. They're so fluffy on the outside. They get a little bit of color on the top and on the bottom. They're buttery from the topping, and the cheese filling is creamy and so, so, so good. Time for the taste test. My goodness. Nothing like homemade bread, especially when it's stuffed with cheese, especially if that cheese is feta cheese. The cream cheese makes it a little bit more mild, a little more luxurious actually. There's mozzarella in there, gives it some pull. The feta is the best thing ever, best cheese on earth. Yes, me. I hope you guys give this recipe a try. The exact measurements are on the website, dimitrasdishes.com. Print them out, make it, share pictures with me on social media. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I'll see you all next time. Yes, us.